This is the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. Welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, where we guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Eric Hughey, and multiple times a month we bring you interviews from high-performing millennials who are challenging perceptions and changing expectations of our generation. Our mission is to help you overcome fear, take action, and go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's time to start preparing now, mainly because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, which will create a vacuum of career opportunities that you've been waiting for. Will you be ready? Hey everyone, it's Eric Hughey with the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. I hope you all are doing well. A few of you have been asking, and we're curious about how to get started in podcasting, so I wanted to produce this segment to help you all out with that. It's a presentation or podcast rather called Podcast 2020, and it's all about why you and your company should start podcasting now. Before we get started, I thought it'd be helpful to learn a little bit about me and the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. So about me, again, my name is Eric Hughey. I'm a marketing and branding professional with 8 years of experience, and really I'm a storyteller at heart. I grew up always wanting to produce movies and take pictures and tell stories, and that got me started in broadcast media. And then I quickly realized that broadcast media transitioned well to marketing and communications. Always had an entrepreneurial spirit at heart, and wanted to kind of pursue that first entrepreneurial endeavor, and that's how I came up with the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. If you're unfamiliar with the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, our mission is to really help millennials become the next generation of business leaders. Some of you may be familiar with the term silver tsunami, and what it refers to is the 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring every single day, and it's going to happen for the next 10 plus years. So millennials are really thought of as the young people still in the workplace environment, but not anymore. I think millennials, the oldest millennial this year is 36 years old. So although we're still kind of thought of as the young crowd, we'll quickly be taking the helm in terms of leadership if we aren't already. I think a lot of people who are wanting to take a management or leadership position, who have been patient, who are getting frustrated, I think will quickly be pleased that a lot of openings will happen inside workplaces, inside the corporate environment, but also within the marketplace itself for solo entrepreneurs who may be selling off their businesses or simply closing up shop and retiring. There's going to be these market voids for us to fill. And I guess a third reason would be that we have this negative stigma about our generation. I don't think it's so much millennials as it is a cultural norm to look down upon slightly the generation that comes after you and how they're doing things differently. So everyone's very focused on Gen Z and how they can market to them, what social media platforms they're going to be on. But ultimately, companies aren't going to be successful if they don't have good leadership in place. So that is where my focus is to help millennials become leaders and run these companies from now to years on out into the future until Gen Z takes our place. So again, I'm a passionate storyteller and I like helping people out. And since a few of you asked about podcasting and how to get started, I wanted to do this presentation. Today we're going to cover what is podcasting, reasons why you should start a podcast, how to start a podcast, the equipment you'll need, the software you need, getting guests, and just some general helpful tips to keep in mind as you go down the podcasting road. Here we go. So what is podcasting? This is a definition I found multiple times on the internet, but then also added my own twist on it to give it an extra layer. So I define it as a recording of a spoken audio file with one or more people on a specific topic, and then broadcasting that sound file to that respective topic's audience across the internet. A lot of definitions you'll find is just the recording piece, but I think in my eyes, you don't really have a podcast until you do the distribution component, because if you don't target the right audiences and get it in front of them, then you won't have any listenership. Therefore, it's not really a podcast. But again, that's my definition. recording a spoken audio file, and then broadcasting it to your target audience. Next, we'll get into reasons why you should start a podcast. So there are many reasons why you should start a podcast, but I've listed just a few here. First and foremost being that the barrier for entry is low. Anyone can start a podcast, and I truly mean that. If you simply pick up your smart device, whether that's iPhone or Android, most of them come standard with a voice recording app. If not, you can download tons and tons of options of voice recorders for free from various app stores. So therefore, you can just simply record your voice and post it to the internet or whichever hosting provider you wish. So that kind of segues into the second point, which is a $0 startup fee. So not only do you have to have a wide variety of skill sets or a business license or anything like that to start, you also can do it for free. Like I said, if you have a phone already, the app is for free. So you can be off to the races pretty quickly. Third reason is that it can be a business or a branding tool. If you think of larger podcasts like Bigger Pockets, which is a really well-known podcast in the real estate space, the podcast itself is its business. It's got its own brand, it's got its own revenue streams, things like that. But then the flip side is that it can also be a branding tool. And so if you are a thought leader in a certain field or on a certain topic, this can be simply another one of your prongs of your content marketing approach to get people to your website or your e-commerce page or landing page or wherever you need to direct them to do business with them. So again, it can be a business or a branding tool. Sometimes if you're doing it right, it'll be both. So that segues in again to the next point, which is that it aligns with your content marketing efforts. So many of you may be familiar with content marketing, but it's essentially all around getting the word out about your business and your brand on all your own earned and paid media channels. So for instance, many people looked down upon getting a website many, many years ago when I was growing up and thought it was kind of a weird thing, a weird concept. But sure enough, everybody's got websites nowadays. Then when I was in high school going into college, many businesses looked down on the idea of having social media. And I think we all know where that has got us. Every business has social media platforms, and that is platforms plural, not just a Facebook page, which was all the talk back then, but almost every business nowadays has at least Facebook, LinkedIn, and maybe Instagram or YouTube as well. So I really think that podcasting is going to be the next frontier, if it isn't already in that regard, as far as another layer of content marketing. People aren't going to rely on being in front of a screen anymore, and I think that is catching on more and more. People love podcasts because they are on-demand content, but they can also listen to them passively while still learning. So people listen to podcasts while they're doing the dishes or walking the dog or mowing the lawn, driving. You get the idea. But it's a way for people to multitask in our busy lifestyles that we live. Next, it is a highly concentrated target audience. So we'll get into this a little bit later as well, but podcasts are great because they are the niche of all niches. You can get highly segmented. So if you think about perhaps doing a podcast on fitness, well, there's a lot of fitness podcasts out there, and if you're just simply marketing it to everyone, then in my opinion, you're marketing it to no one. So with podcasts, picking a niche is very important. So perhaps instead of just doing a general fitness podcast, you do a fitness podcast directed at moms. And then you can go another layer, fitness podcast directed at moms who only cook and eat vegan. There you get into a subset of an audience that would be highly concentrated and more likely for you to get advertising dollars because potential advertisers would know exactly who your audience is and who they're trying to reach. The next reason why you should start a podcast is because of multiple revenue streams. So many of you may have heard of them yourselves, but the most common method is what they call pre-roll, mid-roll, and end-roll. So pre-roll is any announcement at the beginning, any type of commercial advertisement similar to what you would hear on the radio or even on the television. So again, there's three forms of that: pre-roll, mid-roll, and end-roll. as the names would suggest. It comes kind of like before your main message of the podcast starts, during the podcast, kind of a break or intermission, and then the outro, kind of when you're wrapping up the message and signing off. Another option would be if you have other platforms. So if you have a website for your podcast or a newsletter, there's opportunities for sponsors to advertise in those newsletters or with banner ads, boombox ads on your website. And then another option is called affiliate marketing. So if you have a certain product or service that you can endorse through your podcasts, some company might pay you to give a discount code to your listeners that they can then get on the internet with, go to a landing page or e-commerce page, type in your promotional code that you would give, and then you would receive a small royalty or kickback for every product sold. So again, a lot of options as far as revenue streams. And again, like my earlier point, if you're doing it right, you could probably capitalize on all these potential revenue streams. And then lastly is networking opportunities. If you're in any type of sales or business development role, it can be really hard to get in front of people, especially when a financial transaction is involved. So having this as just an additional touch point to converse with people, to build a rapport, build a relationship is really incredible. I have a goal of getting to 100 podcast episodes, but even if I don't monetize it or have advertising dollars by the time I get to 100 episodes, then I am very confident and very pleased with the fact that I will have interviewed or interacted with 100 young professionals. So that will be so beneficial for me in my career. So again, there's many reasons why you should start a podcast, but in my eyes, these are the top few that we've gone over. And that again is a barrier for entry is low, the $0 startup fee. It can be a business or a branding tool. It aligns with content marketing efforts. It's highly concentrated to target audiences. There's potential for multiple revenue streams, and there is a ton of networking opportunities. So this is probably the point that you've all been waiting for, is how to start a podcast. And I believe I've alluded to it already, but you can do it very easily with a $0 startup fee. The barrier for entry is low. You can simply pick up your smartphone with a standard voice recording app. If it's not already on there, download it from the App Store. You can speak directly into your phone and then post it on social media or post it on YouTube, post it on a hosting provider such as SoundCloud or Libsyn or Blueberry, Anchor. There are many platforms out there where you can host podcasts. And again, we'll get into that here towards the end of this presentation. But next, after you kind of have a general idea of how to do it functionally, you need to pick a topic. So as I was mentioned earlier, when in doubt, try to pick a topic of a topic, kind of a sub-niche, so to speak. Anyone can interview fitness people, fitness professionals, but you have to think about in terms of audience. What audience segments are out there that are eager to learn about something that you also have expertise and connections with. So it's easy to pick a general topic thinking that you'll have the widest audience as possible and get your numbers up for potential advertisers. But in that example, I think your lifespan is a little bit shorter, because I firmly believe if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. So always try to pick another layer deeper. For me, I've always been interested in business and entrepreneurship. And so if I started a general business entrepreneurship podcast, it might fall on deaf ears eventually, because if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. So I added the layer of millennials and leadership. And so far, it's primarily been a Kansas City focused podcast as well. All my guests live in or around the Kansas City area. Also within your topic, you should know your why. What motivates you to do what you do? What's going to motivate you to continue to produce this podcast week in or week out, or month in and month out, however often you're publishing. But then also the why of your audience. Why would they listen? What are they going to get out of it? Always be asking why, and the classic 5 W's, as we learned in the early years of our life. So as far as general time frame you should be recording, I think anything between 5 minutes and 45 minutes is kind of the general time frame. Anytime after 45 minutes, people tend to fall off. I think that's because of attention span's one, but I think a lot of people listen to podcasts in the car, and I don't think many people have more than a 45-minute commute in the morning. So I think that general time frame of 5 to 45 minutes is kind of the sweet spot. So after you get your message recorded to that time length and it's topic focused, then you need to be editing it down to just the vital information. You want to put the best ingredients as possible and boil it down into one concise message that keeps people coming back for more. And then lastly, you need to decide what or where rather that you're publishing this, and then also how often. I forgot that bullet point here, so forgive me, but you need to decide if you're publishing weekly, every other week, or once a month. Personally, I think if you're going to post once a month, it's not often enough to keep audience interested. And if you only have a couple episodes into your database or source of wherever you're publishing these, then it's going to turn people off because they can't come back to you as quickly to get information. So again, I would say minimum at least twice a month, ideally weekly. Weekly is really tough unless you have multiple people all working on this podcast. I'm flying solo on mine, so I publish twice a month. Ideally would love to go weekly, but just haven't had the bandwidth for that. If you're interested in getting some experience, feel free to reach out to me. That wraps up today's episode. We hope to have brought you some valuable key takeaways. Most importantly, whatever you learned, take action on it. Apply it to your life. Apply it to your career. Motivation and inspiration only come as a result of taking that first step. So if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe on whichever platform you found the show. You can also follow us on all the major social media platforms or contact us directly at genwhyleaders@gmail.com. That's GENWHY leaders@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Hughey, and thanks for listening to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.